Sociologists say that Filipinos are known for many habits. And one habit that Filipinos and the Spanish, for that matter, are known for is the mañana habit. The mañana habit is the tendency among Spanish-speaking South Americans and Filipinos and those perhaps in South Spain to procrastinate and sometimes put off what can be done today because anyway, there's still tomorrow. And I think our gospel today is a very good reminder against mañana habit, especially in our spiritual life. Because you see, a lot of Christians have a spiritual mañana habit. This spiritual mañana habit would, for example, manifest in statements like, Jesus, di sta mo simba, oy, kay bata pa man ta. Dong, manimba na ta, Domingo. Unya na ng simba-simba ma, di bita mo daga ng simbahan. Or for example, Lola, simba-simba ta pag may time, kay 70 anyos na ta. Hapit na. The whole assumption behind these statements, ordinary and maybe amusing at times, is precisely this spiritual procrastination, spiritual mañana habit. Anyway, it's just there. The church will not run. Naarma na diha. So, mintras bata pa ta, enjoy lang. Unya na ta magbasol kung di na ta kalakaw. Our gospel today is a very beautiful reminder, and while reflecting on the gospel, I remembered about a saint who was an expert in spiritual mañana habit or spiritual procrastination. His name is Saint Augustine, great theologian and philosopher in the medieval church. Saint Augustine had a mom who was a saint. Her name is Monica. And Santa Monica, Saint Monica, was constantly praying because Augustine, while he was very brilliant when he was a young man, was not spiritually, you might say, spiritually whole. And so Saint Monica was always constantly reminding Augustine, just like all the moms today, they remind their kids to be, pag binuotan na in taon dong. And the prayer, they say, of Augustine goes like this: Lord, give me holiness, but not today. Give me holiness, but not yet. Our gospel today is a very beautiful reminder against spiritual procrastination. The other term of spiritual procrastination is spiritual slumber. And our gospel today tells us, Jesus in our gospel today reminds us, be awake, do not sleep. This is a reminder against spiritual procrastination and spiritual slumber. When you are slumbering or when you are sleeping, you're not aware of what is being said. So for example, if you are in a church, you're listening to the homily and the homily is boring, and then there's a tendency for you to nod off. And then when you go home, your husband will ask you, what did the priest say? And you'll just say, I don't know, I was just, nodding off the whole time. You're not aware, you're not conscious, and you're oblivious of what is going on. And so our gospel today is a very beautiful reminder: watch and be awake. Pagmata. And The word pagmata, the verb pagmata, or the phrase be awake, has a plethora of symbolisms even in our ordinary language. So for example, when we say pagmata, it's not just being physically awake. Sometimes it can also mean, or most of the time, it can also mean as be aware with your surroundings. Be aware with what is going on around you. So for example, ang asawa nga giilad sa iyang bana, nangabit ang bana, kung masakpan sa asawa mo yun ang asawa, nagmatar jud kog buntag ni mudong. That's an expression in the Visayan language saying that I was not aware of what was going on in our marriage. Or ayog tulog-tulog diha, kay mabiyaan jud ka. It's saying you have to be mentally alert. And so our gospel today is not just a reminder about the second coming of Christ when the master of the house will arrive in our midst. It is also a reminder that we should be mentally alert. We should be awake and not be slumbering spiritually and even physically. Our gospel today perhaps is a very good reminder about the future. It will happen few weeks, months, years from now. But I think the immediate meaning of our gospel today is that it reminds us to be awake in order for us to be able to engage today, to be present today, to live today, not in the future, not on yesteryears, but to engage today, to be attentive to the moment at hand. Being aware has many meanings. In Tagalog, we usually say, when you're aware, mulat ka. Mulat sa katotohanan. A few weeks back, I gave a homily about being woke. That's an expression among the millennials, being woke. And being woke means being aware, being attentive to the social issues around us. Being woke means being concerned about what's happening to my neighbors. And I think this meaning of the gospel is very fitting to the first Sunday of Advent. Today, the church celebrates the new liturgical year. Actually, today is our new year, new liturgical year, first Sunday of Advent. And the word Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which means the arrival, the coming. See, if our perspective of the arrival of Jesus has something to do with the second coming, which is possibly in the future, perhaps our comment would be, why do we keep on celebrating the Advent? God has not yet arrived. God has arrived in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, but you know, He's going to arrive at the second coming, perhaps not today. That mindset perhaps is the mindset of spiritual slumber, because the other mindset, the one that is more attuned to the message of our gospel today, is that God arrives every day. God comes to us in the Eucharist. God comes to us whenever we see a neighbor suffering. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said, if you give a glass of water to the thirsty, you are giving me water. If you feed the hungry in your midst, you are feeding me. And the meaning of that is that God comes to us every day, every single day. And if you are woke, if you are awake, if you are attentive, if you are engaged with the presence, you are aware of those moments when God knocks at your door or at your heart, because God wants to come into your life. Pero kung moingon kag, di ista mo simba kay, di man mo dagan ng simbahan. perhaps you're missing out God's presence, God's arrival every day. If you say, for example, I will just enjoy today kanang mga relief goods, kanang tabang-tabang sa mga naglisod, nagmatiguang na ta. Karon, jam-jam lang sa. Perhaps then you will be missing of that golden opportunity to welcome Christ in our midst. And sometimes all of us fear about the judgment day of the second coming, which is quite maybe far off. Takaybaw, basin ugma, basin in 2 hours or 30 minutes, we don't know. But I think the whole point of our gospel today is that it's not so much, or maybe yes, we will be judged at the second coming, but I think the whole point of Jesus telling us being awake and being engaged in the present is because we will be judged every time God comes into our lives and knocks on our hearts. We will be judged every time when we close our doors, when we slam our doors on the face of the needy, and that needy person is Christ. And so therefore, the judgment happens every day. When we are oblivious, when we are insensitive, when we choose not to see the sufferings of our brothers and sisters, when we choose not to be sensitive to the needs of our brothers and sisters, perhaps God will judge us. Because in the Gospel of Matthew, he says, every time you visit the sick, you visit me. Every time you feed the hungry, you are feeding me. And you know, God has a very long memory, but also He has a very vast heart to forgive. And so in our gospel today, at the end of the gospel, the metaphor is very beautiful because it tells us that the Master leaves us, but gives us, each of us, work to do. And so being aware is not just for the sake of us being aware or being woke or being awake. It is something to do with, yes, being attentive, but doing something about it. Because when you are aware that God, when we are aware that God is in our midst, di man yun ta magpapulpul-pulpul, huy, naman din Ginoo diri. If every time we realize that God is in this church, we will not be judging each other. If we will be aware that God is constantly in our family, di yun ta mag-away, kaulaw na Ginoo. If we are aware that God is in our workplace. I have been a priest for more than 20 years and I always am amused every time I go to a family and the mom will say, "Hoy, pagbehave ka na pari." Pari ra ganina. When we are aware that God is in our house, is in our midst, is in our workplace, in our business, then we will be just, we will be compassionate, we will be merciful. And I think that is the whole point of our gospel today when Jesus says, be awake, do not sleep. Ayog tulog-tulog sa pansitan. Because when you sleep and when you are slumbering, you will miss out those beautiful golden opportunities when God will come to us and say, "Hey, Father Randy, notice me. I am here. Do not fall asleep. This is your opportunity to welcome me into your life." And the point of Advent season is for us to be constantly reminded that this is an ongoing challenge for all of us. May this Advent be a moment of being awake, of rising from our spiritual slumber, so we will be aware, we will know that God comes to us every day in our lives.